Section 1 to 1,500 words. The wind howled across the desolate ridge, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and something else. Something wrong. Sergeant Calloway adjusted his rifle against his shoulder, scanning the endless expanse of mist swirling in the abyss below. A mile deep, the gorge stretched like an open wound in the planet's surface, its depths swallowing all light. Movement? Jensen's voice crackled over the comms. Calloway exhaled slowly. Maybe. Rook's picking up distortions again. The AI's voice, flat and precise, cut in. Thermal readings inconsistent. Possible activity within the lower quadrants of the chasm. Jensen sighed. Of course, because sitting here for weeks wasn't tense enough. They had been stationed here for 22 days. Snipers, strategically placed to guard the only approach to the ravine. Beyond it, nothing but endless wasteland. If the enemy got through, there was no stopping them before they reached the last human stronghold on the planet. The problem was, no one had seen the enemy up close. Not even drone scouts returned from below. Just fragments of distorted footage. Twisting shapes. Too fast. Too fluid. Eyes on marking, Calloway muttered. He peered through the scope. There, a shadow moved against the rock wall, far below the mist line. Not climbing. Pulsing. Shifting. He adjusted the zoom. The figure was wrong. Not quite solid. Limbs too many or maybe too few, adjusting as it moved. Calloway's finger rested on the trigger. Then, the shape melted back into the fog. Confirming, Jensen said, shifting slightly from his position. Tell me I didn't just imagine that. Contact verified, Rook interjected. Unknown entity. Analysis, insufficient data. Fantastic, Jensen muttered. Silence stretched between them. The weight of the unknown pressed against their ribs. Calloway had fought in 4 off-world wars, faced insurgents, Mets, and planetary sieges. Nothing made him uneasy like this. The comms crackled again. Rook, run a scan. Closest viable target. A pause. Then, nothing within firing range. However, audio anomalies persist. Subsurface activity detected. Below the mist? Correct. Jensen exhaled, a quiet curse under his breath. That's new. Calloway glanced toward the supply cache. 2 weeks of rations left. Ammunition still good. The real problem was time. Command wasn't sending reinforcements. They were the reinforcements. Another sound. This time closer. Not wind. Not rock. A wet, dragging noise. Calloway turned just as something shifted near the edge of the cliff. His scope caught it. A sliver of movement just beyond the natural rock formations. A shape that hadn't been there seconds ago. Jensen. 9 o'clock. Jensen adjusted. Rifle swinging to position. I see it. They watched. No breathing. No twitch of motion. Just the patient stillness of a predator. Calloway did what a sniper did best. He waited. The shape moved. 1 second it was still. The next it wasn't. It darted. Too fast, too unnatural. Fluid like ink dissolving in water. Calloway fired. The round cracked through the night, slamming into the target. Nothing. Just rock dust and empty air. Negative hit, Rook confirmed. Jensen swore. That was a solid shot. No way I missed that. Calloway's stomach churned. You didn't. The gorge exhaled. A low, guttural resonance, vibrating through their bones. It wasn't a place they were guarding. It was a thing. Section 2 to 1,500 words. The first attack came just past midnight. No warning. No sound. Just a sudden ripple of movement in the mist, like ink spilling through water. Calloway's rifle was up before his mind could process the shape slithering toward them. He fired. The round struck center mass, but instead of dropping, the creature absorbed the impact. Flesh rippled, shifting around the wound, sealing itself as if the bullet had never hit. Jensen was already engaging. 3 rounds. Precision shots. Each one found a target, but nothing died. The figures just twisted, reforming in ways that defied logic. "Rook," Calloway barked, "give me something useful." Biological composition, unknown. High regenerative capacity. Suggest incendiary countermeasures. Fire it is. Jensen swapped mags. Thermite rounds. Calloway did the same. They fired in tandem. The moment the bullet struck, the creatures shrieked, a sound like metal tearing underwater. Flesh bubbled, twisted, blackened. But they kept coming. 5 advancing, Jensen called. Another 4 out in the mist, maybe more. Calloway tracked movement through the scope. Their enemies didn't run. They pulsed, flickering through the fog like fractured images, never moving in straight lines. It made headshots almost impossible. He adjusted, a single round to the knee. The limb melted, but the creature didn't collapse. It crawled, dragging itself forward. "Not stopping," Jensen warned. "Yeah, I see that." Calloway swapped tactics. They weren't going to kill these things. Not conventionally. But if they could stall them, hold the line. He shifted position, lining up a shot at a rock ledge above the nearest cluster. Fired. The impact triggered a small avalanche, burying 3 of them under a cascade of stone. No confirmation of kill. Didn't matter. They were slowed. Jensen laid down suppressive fire, alternating between thermite and armor-piercing rounds. One of the creatures lunged forward, close enough now to see it clearly. It had no face, no discernible eyes, just a mass of shifting, half-formed features, like it was constantly trying to decide what to be. Jensen put 2 rounds into its chest. It reeled, twisting it on itself, then snapped back into something faster. "Shit," Jensen muttered, backpedaling. Calloway reached for the detonator clipped to his belt. Time to see if they like explosives. He triggered the charges they'd planted earlier. A line of shock mines detonated across the terrain. The concussive force tore into the advancing creatures, sending pieces flying, but the pieces moved. They regrouped, pulling themselves back together, limbs knitting like liquid. Jensen wiped sweat from his brow. "I don't like that. I really don't like that." The creatures hesitated, shifting back toward the edge of the cliff, observing, calculating. Then, without warning, they stopped. No retreat, no further attack. They just stood there, watching. The mist swallowed them again, and within seconds, they were gone. Jensen's breathing was ragged. That wasn't a full assault. That was... He shook his head. What the hell was that? Calloway didn't answer, because deep in the chasm, far below the mist, something moved. Section 3 to 1,500 words. Calloway replayed the footage for the 3rd time, frame by frame. Each time, the same result, no clarity, no logic. The creatures didn't just move. They shifted, flickering between states, like reality itself couldn't decide what they were. Jensen sat against the rock, rifle across his lap, silent. Neither of them had slept, not after what they'd seen. Rook's voice broke the quiet. "Subsurface movement increasing. Recommend immediate tactical assessment." "Yeah, no shit," Jensen muttered. "We just got reconned by something that shouldn't exist." Calloway didn't argue. He keyed in the last functioning recon drone. Sending it down, the small, winged construct flickered to life, dipping off the cliff edge, vanishing into the mist. The feed crackled, grainy. Temperature readings spiked, then plummeted. Nothing, just endless gray. Then movement. Shapes shifted below. Not individual creatures. Something larger. The mist swirled, parting for a fraction of a second, revealing. Calloway's fingers tightened. Jensen leaned in. "That's not." His voice trailed off. The ground moved. Not the creatures. The ground itself. It wasn't rock down there. It was something else. "Rook," Calloway whispered, barely able to process what he was seeing. Confirmed structure of the gorge floor. A pause. Then error. No geological consistency detected. Jensen swallowed. That's not a canyon. Calloway's gut twisted. No, it was a maw, a vast living thing, its surface shifting like pale, porous flesh. The creatures weren't separate from it. They were part of it, small offshoots of a greater whole. The gorge was breathing. Calloway's hands went cold. Pulling drone back, he said, forcing his voice steady. Too late. A shadow rose from the mist. Something fast, formless. It struck the drone, and the feed cut to static. Jensen exhaled slowly. Okay. So, what? We're sitting on top of a goddam. The ground shook. Not like before. This was different. The entire ridge lurched, as if something beneath them was waking up. Rook's voice cut in. New priority transmission. Command override. Static. Then voices. Fractured urgent. Pull back. They are waking up. If they reach the surface, we all... The transmission cut out. Jensen looked at Calloway. Tell me that wasn't real. Calloway stared at the dead comms. Pack your gear, he said. We're out of time. Below, in the chasm, something shifted. And this time, it didn't stop. Section 4 to 1,500 words. The first tremor knocked Jensen off balance. The second nearly took him off the ridge entirely. Calloway caught his vest, yanking him back just as the ground split along the cliff's edge. Below, the mist churned violently, spiraling upward as something immense stirred beneath the surface. The gorge was no longer a passive landscape. It was moving, and the things within it weren't waiting anymore. Rook, give me a sit-reps, Calloway barked, stabilizing himself against the uneven rock. Seismic activity increasing. Estimated collapse within 10 minutes. Surface breach imminent. Surface breach. Jensen snapped. As in, they're coming up? The ridge trembled again. Deep below, something pushed against the walls of the chasm, and for the first time, Calloway saw it, flesh, vast and writhing, stretching up from the depths. The creatures they had fought were merely fragments of this thing. Not soldiers, not scouts. Cells of a greater organism, and it was waking up. Calloway didn't waste time. Jensen, we need to blow the ridge. Jensen didn't argue. He was already moving, sprinting toward the supply cache where their last set of high-yield charges waited. Calloway covered him, rifle sweeping the shifting terrain. The enemy wasn't lurking in the mist anymore. They were climbing. Black, pulsing forms crawled up the cliffside, their bodies twisting unnaturally, dragging themselves forward in bursts of erratic motion. Jensen reached the cache, yanking the detonators free. We set these off. We're going down with it. Calloway kept firing. Better than the alternative, Jensen slammed the first charge into position, arming it. We need an exit plan. There isn't one. Jensen's hands hesitated. Calloway saw the look in his eyes. We hold the line, Calloway said, his voice steady. That was the job. Jensen exhaled sharply, then nodded. All right. More shapes surged from below. The creatures weren't waiting anymore. They pounced, limbs stretching farther than they should, bodies snapping forward like liquid shadows. Calloway emptied his mag into the first wave, dropping 3 before they reached him. A fourth broke through. He slammed his knife into it, but its flesh swallowed the blade, absorbing the impact. It lunged, a twisted mass of shifting forms, but before it could reach him, Jensen's rifle cracked. A thermite round punched through its center, igniting in a burst of white-hot flame. The thing screeched, collapsing in on itself. Keep moving, Jensen shouted, slapping another charge onto the rock. The ridge buckled again. The thing beneath them was pushing harder. It knew. It felt what they were trying to do. More creatures surged forward. Calloway swapped to his sidearm, firing into the writhing mass. He couldn't kill them all. He didn't have to. Just by time, Jensen slammed the last charge into place. Done. Calloway reached for the detonator. The mist ripped apart. A shape rose from the chasm, a vast, impossible form, pulsing with the same shifting mass as the creatures. It was the gorge, and it was no longer content to wait. Jensen stared in horror. Calloway! Calloway pressed the detonator. The ridge exploded. A shockwave ripped through the landscape, a roaring cascade of fire and rock, swallowing the creatures, the chasm, everything. For a brief moment, Calloway saw the thing recoil, riding against the impact. Then the ground vanished beneath him. He fell. The last thing he heard was Jensen shouting his name. Then darkness.